All right. It is Friday. We've almost made it, everybody. We've almost made it. The work week is over. I hope you've had a very productive one. You know, some people work on Saturdays too, because God does say, when you think about it, He gave us 6 days for work and the seventh for rest. So I wonder why we only work 5 days a week. It seems like we're shortchanging ourselves a little bit there. I don't know. There's some theology. There's some practical theology for you. There's some practical theology. In any case, let's jump into it today. Yeah, no, the 5 day work week. That sounds kind of pagan. I'm not gonna lie. Maybe we should be working 6 days a week. Anyway, so yeah, we're gonna get back to this Owen Strachan stuff. There's just so much more to cover. It is. People have been sending me links and articles and just comments and stuff like that. If you didn't watch the short from yesterday, give it a watch. That short is based on a commenter from my last video. Go check that comment out. It was actually really well written. And it basically, he uses the lightsaber as sort of the way you can determine, your enemies versus your friends. Like in Star Wars, if someone's using a red lightsaber, they're a Sith. If someone's using, green or blue lightsaber, they're a Jedi. Like that's how you know them. So you know them by the weapon they choose. And he used that as an analogy to talk about Owen, because Owen is using the weapon of the Sith Lords out there. And so it only stands to reason that you would view him as a Sith Lord. And this is the thing. It's like everybody's noticing this. It's like somebody sent me this article from Alternet. This is not friendly to Christians. This is not a friendly art, but they are noticing what Owen's doing, and they say, "Oh, friend," and they're cheering it on. And if you read this article, we're not going to read it in this video. Maybe I'll go through it in a different video. I just don't have the time for it right now. But you can just see that, like, it's amazing that they pick up this signal. They're like, oh yeah, this is that white Christian nationalism we've been telling you about. The same white Christian nationalism that Owen a couple of years ago was saying was just a fantasy of the woke. And now Flip-Flop Owen has flip-flopped, and he sees an opportunity to I don't know what he's really wanting to do. I guess he's looking for clout. What does he think he gets from this? Well, I think he actually gets this. This is his reward. He gets this notoriety, I guess, or support in the mainstream media. Now he's the stalwart who's evangelical fundamentalist who will stand against the white Christian nationalism that a couple of years ago he said really wasn't a thing. Yeah, of course there are some white Christian nationalists that want an ethno state, whatever, but they're just so few. It's who cares, right? Who cares? But now he's saying, oh, it's a huge problem, and we must. And the drama is in the tweets too. Oh, we must stand by God's grace. Must stand against this wicked ideology. And they pick that up, and of course, this is what they connect Christian nationalism to: Nazi flags. That's what they think. And now Owen is doing their bidding. He's doing their service. And I think that this is the reward he wanted to get. He wanted to get this reward for he's the warrior. Well, Owen, congratulations. You are the social justice warrior. You're the new one, and you're the new guy that everyone's going to be mad at me for opposing. You're just the Russell Moore 2.0. I've been through this song and dance before. I remember people telling me that I would ruin my credibility, I'd ruin my career, everything, if I criticized Russell Moore and things like that. And I didn't care then about that, and now everyone sees it, and I don't care now. You're the new Russell Moore, Owen. That's you. That's you. By your own words, by your own definitions, you're totally woke, man. By the way, this Flip-Flop Owen thing, people have been pointing this out for a long time. And obviously I knew this too, but I didn't know that the liberals knew this. I mean, they did. Here's an article from the liberal perspective. These are woke. This is SBC Voices is really woke. When Owen Strachan was woke is the title of the article. We didn't change, they did. Yeah, you're right. That's right. He flip-flopped on this, and good for him. He flip-flopped to the right side, at least before, and now he's flip-flopped back. Flip-flop Owen, flip-flop, flip-flop. He just keeps flip-flopping. And so you never quite know where he's coming from, because I don't think he actually has solid position. He's going wherever he feels that he has the opportunity, I don't know, to get some clout, I guess is what it is. This is just like the weather vane. It's just like the weather vane. Wherever the wind's blowing, that's where Owen Strachan is signaling. Because 2 years ago, when they wrote this article about Owen flip-flopping, he used to be woke, now he's not, he was at the height of his anti-wokeness. And when he was at the height of his anti-woke arc, he was saying, oh, yeah, that white Christian nationalism thing, that's a fantasy. In fact, it wasn't that far away from this date when this article was published that he said that. And now here we are a couple years later, and he's like, oh, it's the biggest threat. I've got to dedicate. Oh, I must. By God's grace, I must oppose this wicked ideology. It's unbelievable, guys. It's unbelievable, but I'm beating a dead horse here. Well, maybe we'll go into this article, too, because this article is very interesting because it talks about Owen flipping from woke to non-woke, and now we're at the end of that arc, and he's flipping back to woke. It's just very interesting. By the way, I emailed Owen yesterday just to warn him about this conference thing that he's doing. Because I said, look, if you want to talk about kinism, fine. I can't imagine why anyone would want to draw attention to such a fringe movement that has no power, no influence on anybody. There are real kinists out there, obviously, but they're small, they're not threatening, you know what I mean? But if you want to do a thing on kinism, fine. Just don't do it sloppy like I know you're going to do, because you're going to hurt people in the process. You're going to be lying about people in the process. You're going to ruin your own credibility, and actually you're going to be ruining G3's credibility, because we're going to look at this conference as the MLK G3 conference. Unbelievable. But anyway, he's not going to take my advice. He's going to go forward because he's looking for more of this. Hope it's worth it, flip-flop.
And so this is what I said. I said, I'm confused, Owen. Who are you talking about? Your position on the first paragraph looks indistinguishable from people like Stephen.
I think I might have I might have to find my spot here. Give me 1 second. All right, I'm back. I found my spot. I was behind a little bit.
There's that one guy that they'll point to say, like, this guy is, but you knew it wasn't a looming threat. You believed your eyes, and you said, that's not the threat. And we're pulling resources away from the real threats. And it's being done all over again. This is Russell Moore's tactic.
Yes.
Why is Owen Strachan doing it? All right, so here's where things really blew up. So let's see if I can. I'm trying to get the right order here. Okay, Andrew Torba. Here's what Andrew Torba said. God created different ethnic groups. To preserve them is to preserve God's creation and is therefore an inherent good.
Okay, stop right there. So this is, I guess, one of the tweets that got the whole tirade, the little tantrum, the little tizzy started with Mr. Flip-Flop Owen over here. It was this, and then it was the Matt Walsh thing, I think. So this is the tweet, too, that a friend of mine kind of, reached out to me. And this is a friend. This is someone who likes me, who I assume wants the best for me, things like that. This is not an enemy. But this friend does not like Andrew Torba. He thinks he's an anti-Semite, the whole 9 yards, right? And so he shared this with me, and he wanted to get my opinion on it. And my opinion, and I'm not going to tell you our whole conversation, but my opinion on it, I'll tell you right now, was that I didn't agree with it. I didn't agree with it. And I hadn't seen the tweet, because I don't follow Twitter that carefully. I hadn't seen the tweet independently. I only saw it in the context of this conversation. But if I had seen it in the wild, so to say, I would have saw it, and I wouldn't have agreed with it, and I would have just moved on with my life, because it's really not that big a deal. Because my disagreement here is about the part of inherent good, right? Because I'm not entirely sure what he means by that. Does that mean that it's there's a lot of different options for what inherent good means, right? Preserving, an ethnicity is an inherent good. Does that mean I have an obligation to do it? Does that mean that everybody has an obligation to do it? Does that mean that if I don't do it, am I sinning? Does that mean that it's a good thing, it's a wise thing, it's a legitimate option for people, and there's everything good about it? Because I've said that kind of thing before. Like, there's everything good about, if you're a white person and you want to marry another white person because you want to preserve the traditions and things like that, that you've kind of inherited and things like that. I've said something like, there's everything good about that. So that it could mean that too, right? So it's just, to me, it's a little ambiguous what Andrew is trying to say. And so I would have said, I don't really agree with that, and I would have moved on with my life. If I was inclined to, if it was like really important to me to find out Andrew's meaning there, you know what I would have done? I would have contacted Andrew and said, "Hey, Andrew, what do you mean by this?" That's what I would have done. But in isolation, it's like, I'm not sure I agree with that, but I just move on with my life because I don't know what he's saying, and it doesn't really, either way, it doesn't really matter much to me in my context. So I just would have moved on with my life. I don't agree with it, but I would have moved on with my life. That's it. That's it. And the thing is, I don't have a negative opinion of Andrew. In fact, I have a positive opinion on Andrew. But I think that even if I had a neutral opinion on Andrew, I would have moved on with my life. I would not have ascribed him all kinds of wicked, evil beliefs like, oh, well, this is wickedness. This is wickedness. You're going to see what he says about this. And there's no reason to do that to a brother. There's no reason to do that to a brother in the Lord. Andrew Torba said something I disagree with. I could either find out more to see maybe I don't disagree with it. Depends on what he means. It's a little ambiguous. Inherent good? I'm not sure. Because I've said something similar. There's everything good about X. Does that mean that you have to do X? No, that's not what I mean. But there's everything good. If you want to do it, that's totally good. That's good. That's right. That's wonderful. So it could mean that. It could mean this. I don't know, but I don't agree with it as worded. I wouldn't have said it. There's lots of things that Andrew says that I wouldn't have said. But he's not my enemy, so I don't treat him like an enemy. I don't assign the worst possible meaning, the worst possible motives, the worst possible ideologies to a tweet that's somewhat ambiguous. I don't do that to a friend. I don't do that to a neutral. But Owen's on a holy war. Owen is after some clout. Owen wants Alternate to write a friendly article about him. And so Owen goes in.
Someone is saying that the video is not working. Please, if the video feed's not working, let me know, guys. I want to make sure. I'll re-upload this if people aren't getting it.
On a scale of 1 to 10, this disagreement is just like if it turns out that Andrew's saying something here that I disagree with, it's not like on the scale of disagreements. You've got to do some triage here. You just have to. It's not everything is not a 5-alarm fire. Is that what it is? 5-alarm fire. Is that the worst one? I don't know if that's I think so. 5, yeah, because it would be 5 different stations. Yeah, everything's not a 5-alarm fire. Owen runs around out here that any kind of error on the right is like DEFCON, whatever the worst one is. Is it 1, 5? I think that one's the reverse one. DEFCON 1. He runs around like his hair's on fire when any time someone on the right says something that he thinks is an error, it's a wicked ideology, must be opposed. By God's grace, we will win. By the minute, we are winning. It's just so dry. It's just dramatic, too. Ugh. This guy, he's not my kind of guy. Somebody showed me a tweet, and we're going to have to talk about this one, too. And he says, things that stop me in my tracks. This is back when this is woke Owen. Things that stop me in my tracks. And he lists stupid things. And then he's like, interracial marriages with God's grace. It's so gay, man. It's so dramatic.
Anyway, Andrew Torba. God created different ethnic groups. Okay, let's pick that apart for a moment.
Let's.
A very scaled back, like... It's a very basic tweet. There's not a lot of qualifications.
Right. It's a basic tweet. That's okay. So that's exactly what I was trying to say earlier. It's basic. And so there's a little bit of ambiguity here because this is obviously a topic that requires a lot of thinking, a lot of thought. So he's putting out a basic idea here. And so to me, it's like, do I even know what this really means? As it's written, I can't agree with it because I think it could mean, something that I wouldn't agree with. Again, not a big deal either way. Not a big deal, but it's a basic tweet. And so to import all kinds of meaning that he didn't say in the tweet into the tweet, listen, maybe he should communicate differently. That's up to him. But you shouldn't be doing this to a brother. You got to take responsibility for yourself.
It's probably not the way I would phrase what Andrew was trying to communicate. And one of the reasons I know that is because I actually talked to Andrew, and I might read for you some of the private messages he sent me because I was...
Imagine that. Imagine that. John Harris didn't know what he was talking about, Andrew was talking about. And so you know what he did? Did he blast him online? Did he get all dramatic and say, oh, by God's grace, we must defeat this evil. We must. Did he do that? No, he didn't do that. He said, you know what? I've got this thing. I could just reach out to Andrew. Let me send him a little message. Hey, Andrew, what did you mean by this? This is pretty easy.
I did message him, and he actually responded to me, and he basically said, no, people aren't understanding what I'm meaning. Here's what I'm meaning. So here's the tweet again. God created different ethnic groups. That's true. God did. That's what Acts 17 says.
True.
God, you could look at the Tower of Babel to be an instrument that God used to this. I tend to think, and I'm not alone in this, that there was a plan for people to spread out and form nations before the Tower of Babel. And because they weren't doing it, God forced the issue. But I don't think that's...
This is interesting, and I'm not going to talk about this because this is about a video about Owen. What John said there is extremely interesting. I don't know if I agree with it or not, but there's a lot to it that makes some sense. There's a lot of thinking. It's a lot of forbidden thinking, so remember that. If you start to think about these things, someone like Owen might start to call you a chemist. But there's a lot of really interesting topics in that area about, so the Tower of Babel happened, we get that, but let's just say that people weren't doing what they were doing in the Tower of Babel, trying to get to God. Were we just going to have no nations? What was the plan, right? There's some interesting thought experiments that you could have in there.
Part of the fall, I think that's part of God's plan, but whether you think, however you land on that, yes, that is true, that sentence. To preserve them is to preserve God's creation and is therefore an inherent good. Now, think about this with me for a moment. If we said that God created a certain species of bird, an environmental, environmentally that bird is under threat, would we seek to try to preserve that bird, that certain species? And you say, well, God never gave us a mandate to. Right. I mean, there's not like a chapter and verse I can point you to that says you need to protect this wildlife here. But we know instinctively that that was something God called good at one point. Yes, marred by the effects of the curse of sin, but that's something God called good. And preserving that and taking care of that is a good thing. Just like preserving and taking care of our families is a good thing. Just like protecting our countries is a good thing, right? That's really all Andrew was trying to say. And I know because I talked to him about it. And I'll give you some of the things that he sent me. He sent me some tweets that he said, this is basically my position, or this is a clarifying thing. And I asked him specifically, I said, Andrew, were you saying that interracial marriage is wrong? He says, I wasn't saying anything close to that. I wasn't thinking that. That's what people, though, are taking this, and they're calling him a kinist. They're saying...
Right. So there it is. All you had to do is ask him, hey, man, are you against interracial marriage? Are you saying that it's wrong to do interracial marriage because, it's an inherent good to preserve an ethnicity's culture or things like that? Is that what you're saying? If you have to ask, because the thing is, some people, listen, if I would have saw this in the wild, I can't obviously turn back time and understand, what I would have done if I had, if something was different. But if I would have saw this tweet in the wild, I'm pretty sure I just would have moved on with my life. I wouldn't have had any desire to ask, and no need to ask Andrew what he meant by this. And that's a completely fine reaction, in my opinion. Why would I have to ask him, right? But if you have to ask, if you really must know whether Andrew Torba is for or against interracial marriage, if that is a burning question that you must have answered for some reason, I don't know why that would be, but if you must, you could probably get him to respond to you. I've never had a problem getting Andrew to respond to me. He's pretty gracious with his time. Hey, Andrew, are you against interracial marriage? Is that what you were saying in this tweet? No, I wasn't saying that at all. I was just, here's what I was saying. Problem solved. Problem solved. And then you don't have to embarrass yourself in a colossal, sinful Twitter storm calling him a kinist. You don't. You can find out what he actually means, and maybe you still disagree with it, and you can go ahead and blast that. Nobody's saying you can't criticize. See, that's the point. This is the whole thing, guys. This is the whole thing. people on your right that say something maybe a little bit more than you would say, you can criticize them all you want. Nobody is against criticism. I am not against, obviously, I'm not against criticism. I enjoy it quite a bit. All I'm saying, all I'm asking, all I'm pleading with guys like Flip Flop Owen over here is to stop treating us like your enemies. We are not your enemies. Stop using the weapons of our actual enemies, the people that hate Christ and hate his word. That this is how they treat us. Owen, this article, the only thing it does is further cement the narrative that Christian nationalism is all about white supremacy. The very same narrative you knew was a lie not more than 2 years ago. You knew it was a lie. You knew it was a play against Christians. It's a play against any Christian action in politics. Every Christian action in politics is going to be called Christian nationalism, and it's going to be connected to white nationalism. It's going to be connected to, all the evil stuff that you hate. And it's a lie in 2021. It's a lie now. But you are now part of that lie. It's unbelievable, Owen, that you're doing this, but you are. And I'm going to obviously have to oppose it the same way I opposed what Russell Moore was doing back in 2018 when you were still woke. The same way I opposed what Tim Keller was doing and all these losers. Like the same thing I was doing back then, I'm doing it now with you because now you are serving the same enemy. You're treating a brother with the same weapons that the enemies treat him. This guy does not have any need for additional people to slander him, but you've decided to pile on, and you're getting your little pats on the back and your attaboys, and you're getting a little bit of play in the media. It's not going to be long-lived, and they're going to discard you like a bad habit. But the thing is, Owen, I don't think there's any hope that you're going to change. I don't. I think this is what you live for. This is what gets your juices flowing. This is what gets you going. That's what I think.
That this is all about interracial marriage, and whatever your disagreements with Andrew Torbas, because I know some of you probably have them, and maybe some of you are concerned about some things. This tweet right here, it's just not what it's being portrayed as.
This happens with Andrew a lot, and there are some things that I can understand why someone would question them with what Andrew Torba tweets, right, in the ways that they do. But more often than not, I get sent something, and I'm like, this is completely you're importing all kinds of context into this. You're doing this, and I happen to know this because I've talked to him. And I've seen him in private chats, and I know what he's about in private. Because I think a lot of these guys, I feel like they have this impression, and I've been told this by some people, that we put out our content and stuff, but then we're all talking together in private chats, and we're like secretly racist and secretly, but we're like, oh yeah, how are we gonna get around this one? Oh, I gotta put a Hulk Hogan meme up. Yeah, we'll do that, and that's how we'll signal to each other that we're Nazis, and like that's the impression that some of you guys have. Andrew is exactly the same in private chats as he is on Twitter. He's exactly the same. Unbelievable, man. Unbelievable.
I didn't think of it in those terms when I first saw it. I didn't assume the worst about it. I can sort of see how some people might think, okay, like preventing interracial marriage is a mechanism for this, but that's not what Andrew Torva said, and it's not what he believes, according to him. So Owen Strachan retweets that. And he says, this hot nonsense is catching on in evangelical and reform circles. Oppose it like you would oppose the plague. Okay,
it's
so
it's all performance. This is hot nonsense. Is this how Owen talks? He's putting this on. He has to be. This is hot nonsense. Ugh. Just enough to. Ugh. This guy is not my kind of guy. In case you don't know, that's a quote from Frank Costanza.
That's the plague. It's the plague to want to preserve ethnic groups. Now, one of the questions I think people have is there's confusion over the term ethnic group. Stephen Wolf got in trouble for this because Stephen basically says ethnic groups are they're people living with shared experiences over time. It doesn't have to be genetic.
This is hot. This is hot nonsense. This is hot nonsense. You should avoid this like the plague.
Group. Torba didn't define what an ethnic group is. Some people.
Hold on, I got to rewind this because he said something interesting about how Stephen Wolf, who you've been told is an evil racist kinist as well. There's some interesting things here about how he defines ethnicity, and I want to make a comment about it.
Oppose it like you would oppose the plague. Okay, so now that's the plague. It's the plague to want to preserve
so gay
ethnic groups. Now, one of the questions I think people have is there's confusion over the term ethnic group. Stephen Wolf got in trouble for this because Stephen basically says ethnic groups are they're people living with shared experiences over time. It doesn't have to be genetic. That's an ethnic group.
So this is interesting. So Stephen, who's being called a kinist, is not liked by kinists because he doesn't to him ethnicity is kind of this like organic thing that kind of develops over time where people have kind of similar lifestyles, similar experiences, similar things, and of course geography and genetics, they play a part in that because people naturally kind of group together and stuff like that. But that's not the primary thing. It's more about sort of the shared culture, the shared experiences, the shared traditions, things like that. So according to Stephen and the way he defines this, I would not be in an interethnic marriage most likely because there are some cultural differences. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like the way that my family, my extended family celebrated Christmas and things like that was different than the way my wife's family did because, I'm Puerto Rican. So, we'd have the pernil for Christmas, whatever, things like that. She never had roast pork for Christmas. So things like that, like small things. But I grew up in New England. You know what I mean? I grew up in Connecticut. She grew up in Vermont, and there's some obvious differences there, but there's a lot of similarities too, that we have a lot of shared experiences, a lot of shared traditions. I mean, even things like where we went to field trips, as kids, the different kinds of things we experienced as kids, they're comparable. They're comparable. Even the way we talk is comparable. Even though I'm Puerto Rican, she's white, we have, according to Stephen's definition, we would actually probably share an ethne. And obviously, I don't want to speak for Stephen, so if I'm wrong about that, I'm not intending to be wrong about that. But so anyway, interesting, because you've heard Stephen is this evil, racist, whatever, and it's just not that way. Oh, you're going to be told by Owen that Stephen's a kinist probably, if he has the courage to name names, which I don't know if he will. But if he does, he's going to say Stephen's this and that, and he's not going to tell you about what I just told you about.
Torba didn't define what an ethnic group is. Some people think it's purely genetic, and that's all it is. I tend to one of the difficulties is the terms ethnicity, race, people. They all kind of meant the same thing a few hundred years ago, and now, especially since Darwinism, some of these things have been separated and given new meanings. And I mean, this is why you hear creationists say we don't believe there's only one race. Well, before Darwin, people were saying there were different races, and they weren't evolutionists, right? So this is part of the problem with these terms. But I tend to think of them as just, you're talking about a people that's living together, intermarrying with each other. It's an extended family. Extended family will have people adopted into them, by the way. So it's more organic. It is not this regimented thing, in my opinion, that is like they must all share this genetic gene or something, this gene.
I was at the cigar lounge last night with a brother who, by the way, who I met online for my content. This is a good guy, By the way, thanks, Luke, for the cigar. Anyway, we were talking a little bit about this, and yeah, of course, like you can be adopted into an extended family, into an ethnicity sort of. And, we talked about Ruth, your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. She was completely kind of submitting to a different culture. She was assimilating into that culture. She was not saying, okay, I'll be Jewish, but I'm going to still be a Moabite. You know what I mean? I'm still going to do Moabite things. Like, no. She was saying completely, totally, you are my people now. I mean, obviously, this can happen. To gain to be part of the family. I mean, that's the birthright. But
you can adopt and extend a birthright to people who don't have that, and they adopt your way of life and your customs. And so this is called assimilation on a mass scale. So we have we have some people in the chat. I should probably get done with my point, and then I'll go to the chat. So give me a minute, guys. I don't know what's going on in the chat here, but let me just finish my point here. So Torba then responds. He says, this feminine scolding and self-righteous liberal virtue signaling doesn't work anymore, and it never will again.
Amen. Amen. Guys like Owen still have influence, but it is waning. And every day that passes, as our real battles get more and more serious, these men they're going to be a byword. They're going to be a laughing stock. They're going to be a source of meme making. If you want to put, a limp-wristed, a joke of an evangelical into a meme, you find Russell Moore, a picture of Russell Moore like this, so excited to meet Obama, or with a stupid mask on. You want to put a picture of a fearful Christian out there, you put a picture of Russell Moore with a stupid mask on. You want to make a meme mocking like a regime, conservative Protestant. You find David French. You make a meme of David French. And Owen is turning himself into that. That's what's happening. Every guy like Owen this is going to be the end result. You're going to lose influence. You're going to lose authority. And quite frankly, a lot of these guys are losing their souls. You can't serve two masters. You just can't. And a lot of these guys are attempting to. The world recognizes certain people as their own. And right now, those people are like Russell Moore. They love you like one of their own because you're one of them. You're one of them. And this is not a good sign for Owen. I'm being totally serious here. This is taking a serious turn. This is not a good sign when the world is speaking well of you because you're doing their bidding. Not because you're doing the right thing, but because you're doing their bidding, the things that they would do. They want to connect Christian political action with Christian nationalism, with white nationalism, with Nazism. That's what their play is. And you're helping them with that play. And you knew full well that it was a play, which makes me wonder what team you play for, Owen. I'm not going to say you're an unbeliever. I'm not the kind of guy that quickly does that kind of thing. I know people in my comments are saying that, but that's not me. I'm not saying you're an unbeliever. I think that you've got some people-pleasing problems. That's what I think. But it makes you wonder, when you know this is a play and you are choosing to participate in it. Makes you wonder. It makes you wonder. You know that the red lightsaber is for Sith, and you choose it anyway. By the way, did you know, speaking of lightsabers, did you know that Mace Windu's lightsaber was purple? Because purple is a combination of red and blue, which is he's a Jedi, but he also kind of dabbled with some dark side powers as part of his story at one point, and that's why his lightsaber's purple. Interesting. Mace Windu is pretty cool. Pretty cool. Anyway, this video has gone on long enough. We are going to pick back up here with Andrew's interesting response to Owen. I completely agree with it. This kind of scolding, self-righteous, liberal virtue signaling doesn't work anymore and never will again. Owen is making a fool of himself, but unfortunately, he doesn't seem like the kind of guy that is really willing to even take a step back and pause and consider what he's doing. I urge you to, Owen. I urge you to. The world is recognizing what you're doing as what they like to do, and that should give you pause. That should give you a time to reflect on yourself. In any case, I hope you found this video helpful. God bless.